Narrative Part 2, the Actantal Model of A.J. Grimus. Now, when we're looking at narrative in terms of communication theory, it's really important to note that the structure that underlies the story is as important as the story itself. So what we did in slideshow number 1 was we looked at the content of the story and how the structure underlies and holds that together. In professional communication, you're usually given the content, right? In this example, in your work right now, you're choosing your own, but you're given the content, an ad, a movie, whatever it might be. It might be one scene from a movie or a TV show. You might be a camera person or whatever. Your job, and they're calling it content management right now, but that name changes over history, but is to take that content and to manage it. And the managing is the structure. So content management, where the jobs are right now, is taking somebody's or your own content and managing it, structuring it in such a way that it's effective. Now, one of the most effective ways of communicating at all is story. A story goes back as long as we have records of communication, right? So story is going to precede anything that we call history. Now, structuralism. Now, this is a philosophy of the 20th century, started in anthropology, and it was a way of looking at how people structured their acts of communication, and that structuring the entire civilization itself. So we can look at this at many levels, and you should know that there is a post-structuralism, kind of a brother-sister to structuralism, but we're not going to look at that at this time. Now, what else is there? The actants. We said that this slide number 1 was the actantal model. So what is an actant? Well, we know what an actor is, right? An actor is a person in a film. So an actant is going to be anything that makes that story happen, right? So it will be the different people, their actions, right? What do they do structurally, not as a person, but the structure of their position in the story. Now, so the theory, well, I'm not expecting you to read this page, but this is one, if not the most theory that is absolutely on the mark. That wasn't a very good sentence, but you can apply narrative theory to any story, and 9.5 out of 10 times it's going to work very well, if not absolutely perfectly. And we're going to look at several parts, just one today. So this is an amazing theory. Understanding this, if you put it into practice, it will blow your mind. That half that I told, 9.5, even then, like a Quentin Tarantino film, Pulp Fiction, for example, you do have a structural model. It's just been changed. It's been rearranged. So it doesn't quite fit the pattern, but if you look at it, it's using the William Burroughs method of cut-up, which is something we can study at another time. So the actantal model, how is this made up? Well, we're going to begin with a subject, right? The person who is basically usually the protagonist, and a subject in, like a subject of the sentence, is both subject to the story and the main acting agent in. So we've got the subject, and that subject is going to be looking for an object. Now, I'm going to use a classic film as an example, Star Wars. I'll give it, but so you've got Luke. Luke wants something. What does he want? He wants Princess Leia. This is a classic narrative, right? The kid who's not in the kingdom wants the princess who is the kingdom, represents the kingdom. Now, to make so Luke can do this, a subject can get the object. You bring in helpers, and helpers come in at various levels, and their job is to push the narrative forward. Now, anytime you're going to have helpers, you're going to have a binary opposition, and you're going to have opponents, right? The bad guys. Could even be a bad thing, or like a rainstorm. The storms in the Perfect Storm movie, A Perfect Storm, the 3 different storms that show up. Each one of those would be an actant, right? So it opposes the subject from getting the object, right? Getting fishing and getting home again. Now, oops, wrong button. Okay, so we have a sender. Somebody is going to send the subject on a mission, which will be the act of communication itself. Right, so the sender line, and this looks a little bit like sender message receiver. It's a little bit different, a little more nuanced in a couple of ways. But put simply for now, we've got a sender, and like R2-D2 sets Luke on his quest, and a receiver. Who's going to benefit from the subject's activity with the object? And in that Star Wars case, it would be the rebels who are trying to defeat the Empire, right? So the Empire can strike back in the next movie. But this map right here is the first and basic map to putting together a story. Now, how does this go? That first line that we saw here, this is the axis of desire, right? And the axis of desire is desire is an important phenomenon, because desire is eventually going to even break this structure apart when we get into post-structuralism. But the subject desires the object, right? There's a want, a lack, a need, and that's how we narrative theory starts to get involved in psychoanalysis later on. But that axis of desire, right? The subject desires something that sets that desire. Think about it. Desire sets you in motion. I ran out of coffee yesterday. My desire for coffee sent me on a quest to the supermarket to get coffee, right? Haven't left the house for a couple of days, right? So first time leaving. Why? One coffee. Now again, in the next line here, these opposing lines, these are the axis of power. And as we can expect, power always meets resistance, right? So power is a phenomenon. Power is always present in a story. In fact, overcoming the power would be an entirely another theory of communication that we can look at given more time. But that's what we've got here. Who are the power forces at play? So you've got the rebels, but that also includes the Jedi, Obi-Wan, and it would include Han Solo, right? These are, guys, notice Han Solo is wearing police pants. We're going to find out more about him later, right? What side he's on. So the axis of power, and it's going to meet resistance, right? Darth Vader and all the Empire, and the Death Star, right? That thing, the Death Star, is an actant, right? So things, actants, that's why we don't call them actors. And finally, we've got the green line up top, which is the axis of transmission. Now later, when we look at this line, the axis of transmission, this is where your 3 acts of a story go from an Aristotle point of view. We can look at the 6 segments of basic storytelling, and we can look at if you look at something like Joe Campbell's work on mythology, that would all go across that line. So that line, that green line, is going to take on different shapes. We're borrowing it here. It looks like the axis of transmission, sender, receiver, like you're building a telephone or something. And indeed, what we're doing is building on older communication theory, but taking it further, because we can go more than building a telephone. So, right, here's the example we were talking about. Luke Skywalker desires the princess. R2-D2 sets him on his quest. Help me, Obi-Wan, help me, Obi-Wan, the little movie. And Obi-Wan, Han Solo are going to help Luke try to get to the end. Darth Vader and the Empire are going to try to prevent Luke from getting to the end. And when Luke does, right, first rescues the princess, then you have a second climactic fight with the Death Star, that 2-act thing here. It's going to be important later. But the rebels benefit from the action. Now let's go outside, right? This is creative playtime, but the model works in all kinds of ways. So I can say that here I am, and what am I doing? My desire is to publish an ebook. This is something I did on a sabbatical a couple years ago and provided the grounds for doing a class like this. So what's my helper? My helper is having an education. Now the book, the content, is about scuba diving, but it's my education, my scuba teachers. Those are the people who are going to be pushing me forward. And what's going to be pushing me back? Well, you guys know it. It's the new technologies. What technologies are working for you and what aren't? Take a simple one. Twitter. Sure, I've got a Twitter account. It's never done anything for me. I've not yet found a way to use it. That doesn't mean I won't, but that happens. So you encounter, and when you get to each new technology, you've got to learn it again. And it will change. That's why I have not put up any step-by-step plans, because they shouldn't exist, because when you get there, the rules are going to be different. So that's one of the things about living in a high technology age, is we're constantly learning and relearning. Now, who set this into motion? Well, this is Professor Nelson. She directed my doctoral dissertation and studies at Ohio University. And she noted that I was learning how to scuba dive and said, well, you should write a book about this. It became electronic years later. So what we follow on to, who benefits? Well, my career. I got an award, a little statue that got my name published in the school paper, the president's paper. That's pretty cool. And I can get a raise, more money, right? That kind of stuff. Who benefits? The comm department benefits, because we have people in the comm. We're all actively producing. Shepherd University benefits because we're actively producing. You win an award. It makes the college look good, makes your place of work look good. That's why when you see these trophies on people's desks, because when you're in news and you win a trophy for this and that, you put it up because it's building your career and showing how you're doing in the television or radio business. Okay, so lots of people have helped me put this together. And if you go online and search for the Actantal model, you are going to find a plethora, that's a good word, a plethora of stuff. Okay, thank you. This is just to talk through. Please do online study. Thanks.